Hello, I'm Brian Bowyer, author of Flesh Rehearsal, Kill Factor, Alive Undead, Autumn Gothic, and several other books and novels. I write horror fiction mostly, but today is my 50th birthday. And for my 50th birthday, I want to tell you a nonfiction story called This Is What Happened to Tish. I started drinking when I was 11 in 1984, and by age 12, I was an alcoholic. My parents stopped giving me money when they found out I was drinking, and I began selling drugs to finance my addiction. Fortunately, I had several older cousins who were members of the Avengers Motorcycle Club. They sold me drugs for cheap, and I in turn sold the drugs for profit on the streets. I also did a lot of those drugs, but alcohol is what I was addicted to. In addition to selling drugs, I was also involved in other criminal activities. Because I was young, brash, and reckless, I spent a lot of the 1980s incarcerated in juvenile correctional facilities. In one of those facilities, a place called the Salem Industrial Home for Youth in Salem, West Virginia, I began reading fiction at age 16. There was a correctional officer there named Moscar, an Italian dude who happened to be a huge horror fan, and he started bringing me books every day by anyone who had published anything in the genre at that time, which was 1989. Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, Robert McCammon, Richard Lehman, Jack Ketchum. The list goes on and on. Girls also were incarcerated in Salem. Picture Salem as a sprawling college campus with a lot of large brick buildings, all of it surrounded by 12 feet of chain link fencing with 3 feet of razor wire on top of that. It was maximum security. The girls were locked up in a building with two halls called Standard 1 and Standard 2, and the boys were locked up in a building with two halls called Jones 1 and Jones 2. But the boys and girls commingled quite a bit. We didn't go to the cafeteria together, but we did go to the school building together, and we often found ourselves in the gymnasium together, and the library building, and the computer lab. Yes, there was a computer lab in 1989. Primitive, but it was there. And we often found ourselves outside together if the weather was nice, and if the correctional officers liked you, they facilitated alone time for the boys and girls who were dating. So it wasn't too bad. The first girl I started dating was in there for murder. I don't remember what her real name was, but everyone called her VO5 because some of the other girls caught her masturbating with an Alberto VO5 shampoo bottle before I even got there. She was older than me, almost 18, and I had just turned 16, so we didn't date long. Then VO5 turned 18 and got sent to the women's penitentiary to begin serving the rest of her life sentence. The second girl I started dating also happened to be in there for murder. She was my age, 16, about a month older than me, and she was this sweet, shy, really pretty girl named Tish, and she didn't even seem like she belonged there. Then I found out that Tish had never killed anyone. She had simply been with her boyfriend, a much older boyfriend, when he killed someone, and they charged her as an adult. They offered Tish a reduced sentence if she would testify against him, but she refused, and they threw the book at her, gave her life without parole. Oh, and that boyfriend for whom she threw her life away, he never contacted her again. I just thought the whole thing was sad. Anyway, 8 months passed and my time was up. It was time for me to go home. I was still 16. Are you going to call me? Tish said. Are you going to write to me? Are you going to come and see me? Yes, yes, and yes, baby, I said. But I never called her. I never wrote her a letter. I didn't go see her. But I wasn't out long. I got arrested soon thereafter, and then I got locked up in Salem once again. And of course, Tish was still there, as she would be, until she turned 18, when she would be sent to the women's penitentiary to begin serving the rest of her life sentence. You're back, Tish said when I returned. I missed you so much, baby. I missed you too. I hope you're not mad, she said, but I was so happy when I heard you were coming back. And of course I wasn't mad. Tish and I picked up right where we had left off, and I resumed reading horror fiction for the next 8 months. And then, once again, my time was up. It was time for me to go home. I was 17 now. Are you going to call me this time? Tish said. Are you going to write to me? Are you going to come and see me? Yes, yes, and yes, baby, I said, but I never called her. I never wrote her a letter. I did not go see her. I went right back to my fast lane lifestyle, and Salem was 3 hours away from my hometown of Beckley, West Virginia. Anyway, I was 17, but I didn't live with my parents. I was selling drugs again and living in hotels on Harper Road. One day, however, for whatever reason, I stopped by my parents' house on a weekday. My parents were at work, my younger brother was still in school, and the telephone rang. This was 1990. We didn't have caller ID in 1990. In 1990, if the telephone rang, to find out who was calling, you had to answer the phone and say hello. So that's what I did. And it was Tish calling from Salem. Brian, I miss you so much. I miss you too. Why haven't you called me? I'm sorry, Tish. Why haven't you come to see me? The truth was, I had not been planning to go see her. I don't know if you've ever been incarcerated before, but when you're locked up, you make a lot of friends, but then you get out and you never see those people again. Or at least that's been my experience anyway. But then she told me that she was having trouble sleeping, that she would be turning 18 in a couple of months, and that she was terrified of being sent to the women's penitentiary to begin serving the rest of her life sentence. I wish I had some sleeping pills, she said. I just wish I could sleep. And then, just like that, I knew that I would be going to see her. I hated the thought of Tish not being able to sleep, and I had the ability to get her any kind of sleeping pills she wanted. I'll be there Saturday, I told her. What kind of pills do you need? The only ones that really work for me, she said, are Seconal and Nimbutal. Think you can get me some of those? I'm sure I can, I said. Just hang tight. I'll be there Saturday. Thank you so much, Brian. You'll never know how much this means to me. I had never heard of Seconal or Nimbutal, but I got off the phone with Tish, called my cousin Dominic at the Avengers Clubhouse, and he told me that I could pick up a bottle of each the following day. Then I ran into my friend Tracy later that night and said, dude, you want to go to Salem this weekend? If I pay for all the drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, gasoline, you name it. And he was like, hell yeah, road trip. So I picked the drugs up at the Avengers Clubhouse the next day. Then Tracy and I traveled 3 hours to Salem on Saturday. We listened to Slayer, drank whiskey, and did cocaine the entire trip. By the time we got there, we were wasted. Tracy went into the cafeteria with me for the visitation. There was a guard nearby. I don't remember his name, but of course we knew each other and we had always gotten along. He was reading a paperback novel and didn't pay any attention to us at all. And Tish was acting so weird. I mean, flat out bizarre is the best way I can describe it. I had never seen her like that. I figured it probably had to be the insomnia, but it made me a little uncomfortable nevertheless. Apparently it made Tracy uncomfortable too, because he was like, look, dude, I'm going to head on back to the car, drink some more whiskey. Take your time. I was actually relieved when the guard looked up from his book and said, 5 more minutes. Need to wrap this up. I had a lubricated, tied-off condom in my pocket. In the condom was a 100-count Tylenol bottle. In the bottle were 50 Seconals, 50 Nimbutals, and enough cotton to ensure that the pills wouldn't rattle. I took the pills out of my pocket, then leaned in close to Tish and used my back to shield her from the guard while she slipped the bottle down her pants and up inside herself. Thank you so much, she whispered. You'll never know how much this means to me. And that was that. Tracy and I left and headed back to Beckley. Then I got locked up in Salem again, less than 2 months later, for the dumbest reason. Here's what happened. I was walking the streets of East Beckley one night with my friend, Cousin It. His real name was Ronnie Smith, but people called him Cousin It because of his hair and his resemblance to a character on a TV show. He's been dead for years, but at the time he was 20 and I was 17. It was very late, probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had just left the Nut House for some reason. The Nut House was just a nickname for a building called Tanner Apartments that my friend Billy Young's grandmother owned. It was 3 stories tall, but it also had an attic and a full basement. There was 1 kitchen and 1 bathroom on each of the 3 floors that were shared by all the people who rented the 5 bedrooms on each level, and the place was always packed with junkies, drug dealers, alcoholics, prostitutes, you name it. At 17, I had been using the Nut House as a sort of criminal headquarters for years. It was right across the street from the state police headquarters on Eisenhower Drive. So they would be watching us with binoculars, and we would be watching them with binoculars, and cops raided the place all the time. But they never found my ever-changing stockpile of stolen guns up in the attic. They never even went up into the attic, actually, which could only be accessed through a trap door in the ceiling of Billy's closet on the 3rd floor. Anyway, I don't remember why Ronnie Smith and I left the nut house at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I do remember what we were arguing about as we walked those otherwise empty residential streets. Like me, Cousin It was a huge Clive Barker fan, and we had been arguing over which of his novels was the best. Ronnie's favorite was Weave World. Mine was The Great and Secret Show. Then a car stopped right beside us on the street, and a man behind the steering wheel put his window down and said, "Is there a problem?" For no reason. I saw a gun next to him on the passenger seat. I had no idea why he stopped and asked us that, but I pulled my gun, a Taurus PT-92 9mm, from the waistband of my jeans, shoved it into his face, and said, "Not unless you want one, motherfucker." He stepped on the gas and drove away. And that was that. We didn't think anything else about it. The next thing I knew, it was daylight, and Ronnie and I were annihilated. We were back at the nut house, in the kitchen on the 3rd floor, drinking whiskey with 2 other dudes at 8 o'clock in the morning. At some point, we all realized that we were hungry. I volunteered to go to the Super America gas station down the street and get us some food. They all gave me some money, told me what they wanted, and I took off walking. Super America was only about a minute or 2 away. It was right across the street from the state police headquarters, so I didn't think anything of all the cop cars in the parking lot. There were always cop cars in the parking lot. That was nothing new. I had no idea they were looking for me. I was fucked up, but I wasn't staggering or anything. I had a gun in my waistband, but I always carried a gun. I wore baggy clothes. They couldn't see my gun. I wasn't worried about those cops. I walked into the store, got everyone's food, and then as soon as I stepped outside, the cops surrounded me. "Freeze, Bowyer! Hands in the goddamn air!" They took my gun, handcuffed me, and placed me under arrest. I was like, what the fuck am I being arrested for? They told me that the man who had stopped his car earlier and asked us if there was a problem, for no reason whatsoever, was an off-duty police officer. I did not know that man, but he knew exactly who I was. He had gone straight to the police station and pressed charges against me after I shoved my gun into his face. I said, man, I should have shot that motherfucker. That's what I told the arresting officer. Then I said, fine, man, take me to Salem. I'll hang out with Tish and read horror fiction. I'll be 18 in a couple of months. Then I'm retiring from all this crime bullshit anyway. My first day back at Salem, Moskar stepped into my cell, laughing. You just can't stay away from this place, can you? He was holding a thick, hardback book. Is that for me? Yes. Stephen King, 4 Past Midnight. Have you read it yet? No, I haven't. He handed me the book. It's his latest release. I just finished it, so it's all yours. You're gonna love it. Thanks, I said, eager to read the latest from Stephen King. Moskar turned to leave, but then he turned back around. Oh, I just wanted to tell you how sorry I am about Tish. I know you two were close. I looked up from the book. What are you talking about? Moskar cocked his head. You haven't heard? Tish is dead, man. Dead? Yes, I assumed you would have heard. Nah, dude, what happened? Suicide, I guess, he said. Unless she just accidentally swallowed enough barbiturates to sedate a fucking squadron. No idea how she got those in here, Brian. Dude, I didn't know. I swear to God, it never crossed my mind. She told me she couldn't sleep. I'm sure she couldn't sleep, Brian. The prospect of spending the rest of your life in prison at 18 years of age would make anyone have trouble falling asleep. You do believe me though, right? That I didn't know? I do believe you, Brian. And if I were Tish, I would have done the same thing. And if I were you, I would have done the same thing, even if I had known what Tish was going to do. Don't beat yourself up about it. Enjoy the book. I did my time and they turned me loose when I turned 18. I'm Brian Bowyer. Thank you for listening to my story.